Why do singers get nervous on stage? Now, we could list a number of things such as fear of embarrassing ourselves and really wanting to do well, but as I see it, at the root of those nerves are a host of feelings and insecurities that stem from a lack of preparedness and or the personality or temperament of the individual. Let's talk about preparedness. Being fully prepared for a performance involves more than simply learning the melody and lyrics and practicing the song 100 times. Preparation begins long before we even select our performance repertoire. It begins with our voice training. When the requisite vocal skills have been mastered, they can be skillfully applied to repertoire. Only when we have complete trust of our voices that they will cooperate fully during the performance will we start to feel confident in our ability to perform well from a technical standpoint. In other words, preparation is the work that takes place in the months and years prior to the performance, and it manifests itself as technical security that builds confidence in us over time. When we're able to consistently sustain that high note with the desired quality, we're not worried about running out of air because we've mastered our breath management and have also planned our breath renewals for each song, and we're not worried about whether or not we're going to hit sour notes or our voices are going to crack or break because we've mastered our resonance and registration. The performance becomes much less mentally and emotionally daunting. We need to get to that place where we can trust our voices because our technique is reliable, and we can then trust ourselves more and enjoy our own performance experiences more. Here's a little personal story for you. When I first started performing regularly, it was with a teen quartet at a little country church. Someone had heard me singing during a Bible study and told me that I had a really nice voice and should consider singing special numbers during the services. I agreed to it on the condition that he and 2 others join me. I was not going to get up there and sing a solo, even though I had sung several solos at school and as a kid before gymnastics took over my life. They did join me, and we began to perform there nearly every week and then later at other churches in the area. But the morning of each performance, I was a nervous wreck, someone that you would not want to be around. I experienced so much intense anxiety surrounding those early performances, and I was absolutely miserable. And the reason why I was so nervous was because I didn't trust my voice to cooperate when I needed it to cooperate. And the more nervous I became, the more my performances would suffer. I couldn't control my breathing and my pitch would go off, and yet I knew that I wanted to be up there. Apparently, I'm a glutton for punishment. It wasn't until a couple years later, when I was in university, when I started taking singing lessons, that my nervousness surrounding performances started to dissipate. And that was because I was able to rely on my voice more and more. In fact, that's exactly why I started taking lessons in the first place. It was to get to that point where I could feel confident in my singing abilities and stop being stuck in that horrible cycle of nervousness that was holding me back. So we train our voices into obedience. We analyze and nitpick and find and dwell on every possible mistake that we make as vocalists so that we can keep improving and offer our best. We practice and repeat and refuse to stop practicing until our voices are sounding like the ideal that we've imagined. And then we practice some more. Preparation also involves wisely selecting songs that suit our voices and their current abilities. It's about making choices in advance that will highlight what we do well and not draw attention to our technical weaknesses. Sometimes that means making changes to our repertoire to match our current abilities, lowering the key, simplifying a vocal riff, singing a note more lightly than the original singer does, altering the melody a bit to avoid having to sing that problematic note, or removing a song from the set list altogether. This isn't cheating, this is acknowledging and respecting our voices for what they are at this present time. If any part of the song is going to cause us feelings of anxiety, worry that we won't be able to hit that high note or that our voice will break, whatever it might be, it only makes sense to remove the source of anxiety when time doesn't permit further technical development. As our technique improves, we can revisit our choices. Nothing is set in stone. And preparation is also something that happens with every time we perform. The more we audition and perform in front of an audience, the more performance experience we gain, the more prepared we are for the next performance. We've done this before, we can do it again. And if we're moving in the right direction, the venues will get bigger and bigger over time and will carry more and more weight in our careers. The average singer doesn't start out singing for 50,000 people in a concert arena. No, we start out smaller in less pressure-filled environments, venues. coffee houses, open mic nights, local bars, and we grow from there. And each performance along that path is part of our preparation for the next big thing to come our way. The second reason for nervousness that I've listed is our personalities and temperaments. Some of us are anxious by nature. Some of us have been raised to be that way. Our personalities and how we respond to the things that life throws at us are shaped largely by our earlier life experiences and how we were raised. And this is something that I know all too well. I talked a little bit about this in my video on getting out of our comfort zones. I've spent my entire life trying to be a people pleaser, avoiding confrontation, striving in vain for perfection, and being deeply wounded by criticism, perceived or actual. And I know that I'm not an anomaly. So many singers wrestle with this. Sometimes we hinge too much on the perfection of our vocal performances. Of course, no one wants to have a terrible performance. No one wants to hit a sour note, forget the lyrics, have their voice crack, or otherwise sound awful and feel embarrassed. I would never suggest that anything less than a stellar technical execution of the song should be the singer's ultimate goal. However, those of us who are perfectionists tend to have a perspective that's a bit skewed and expectations of ourselves that are unrealistic. Did you know that counselors and psychiatrists see perfectionism as having anxiety at its root? Instead of perfection, which when it comes to the arts is a bit of a vague and elusive goal, and is also a daunting and unattainable goal for anyone who calls himself or herself a human being, what we should be striving for is excellence. Excellence is a way of operating in which we do the very best with what we've got. Perfectionism is static, stifling, and stunting because all it does is point out to us how far off the mark we are. And that's never a good place to be in when we're preparing for a performance or when we're in front of an audience. It leads us to beating ourselves up whenever we make mistakes or don't sound how we're expecting ourselves to sound. One way for us to reduce feelings of nervousness and anxiety on stage is to eliminate negative self-talk, especially analysis of our performances in real time and ongoing internal monologues that are distracting and detrimental to our self-confidence during the performance. I am guilty of this, even when leading worship, which is not really a performance. As we gaze out at the audience, we may become preoccupied with the audience members' real or perceived reactions to our performances based on nonverbal cues such as facial expressions, which may be exaggerated by the adrenaline as it dilates our pupils. We worry about whether or not the audience likes our voices, our songs, our moves, our wardrobe. We worry about whether or not we're going to make that huge mistake on that note that's coming up, and whether or not the audience will notice. We have to resist the temptation to overthink everything during the performance. We need to get out of our heads and trust our voices. And if we're fully prepared for this moment, we can do just that. We can start turning our attention to other aspects of performance, including connecting to the music and our emotions and communicating with the audience. Singing is about communication and sharing an experience. And we need to stop viewing the audience as the enemy, as the source of potential scrutiny and criticism who are being lorded over by the relentless hecklers on The Muppet Show. The audience has paid money to see us perform. It's already captive. It's already rooting for us, not to fail, but to entertain. Yes, the audience has actually invested in our success. However, most of us are woefully egocentric and as a result, often forget that giving a performance is about so much more than just the vocals. In the end, it's all about the audience, not us. The audience just wants a show, a good show of course, but a show nonetheless. The listeners who have paid for tickets and have fought traffic and parking lots and crowds and security to be at that show want to be entertained. They want to be invited in and made to feel like a part of that energy and maybe even a part of the band in some limited vicarious way. We can't offer that to them if we're only focused inward, analyzing our vocals in real time. Fear prevents us from connecting with the song, our emotions, and the audience. An important reminder that I give my students who tend to get really down on themselves for being less than vocally perfect at times is this. The average audience member is not nearly as hypercritical of our vocals as we are. It isn't necessarily that their standards are low, they just see and appreciate the bigger picture better than we tend to because we're so focused on one part of the performance, our vocals. Their idea of good is also not necessarily based on an education or appreciation of all that vocal technique entails. Instead, it's often based on what they personally and subjectively find aesthetically appealing and impressive and visually stimulating, which means that they may not be listening to or judging our voices in the same ways that we are. There are singers with mediocre voices who attract enormous fan bases, while some brilliant vocal technicians who give technically flawless performances fail to move and captivate their audiences because there is something missing on a deeper level. This is because there is more to a performance than having perfect intonation, sustaining the note beautifully, avoiding a register break, having well-defined vowels, having a nice vibrato, and not running out of air before the end of a long passage or vocal riff. The audience factors in many aspects of the performance when determining its overall merit. So that one sour note that most of us are bound to sing sooner or later has to be kept in perspective, measured by the overall performance experience and how it visually and emotionally impacts the audience. Lamperti is quoted as having stated, "It matters not whether your voice be phenomenal or even beautiful. If it expresses the music and the words, you will have an interested audience." Again, although the voice is indeed our primary concern, and we should aim to give the most skillful vocal performances that we can, because we fully prepared, there is so much more to the performance than just the vocals. We have to keep things in perspective or else we will find ourselves distracted and bogged down by the thoughts and feelings that shouldn't be concerning us when we're standing in front of a captive audience. So make sure that you're fully prepared, you know your stuff, that your technique is solid. Make good choices, choices that are going to highlight your strengths, not your weaknesses. Get out of your head. Don't analyze your technical performance when you have an audience in front of you that's craving the entire entertainment experience, and start to view the audience as your ally, not your enemy. The audience wants you to succeed because when you succeed, it gets to enjoy the experience along with you. Thank you so much for watching today. I hope this was really helpful for you and encouraging and offers you a different perspective, a different way of thinking about your performances and approaching them. Please like this video and subscribe to this channel for more free tips and singing lessons like this one. Thank you so much.